Hello and welcome back to my channel. This video is going to be a little bit different. Here I have the Super Not Another Crap kit. Now if you don't know, this kit was released by NerdEcrafter and Smart Art, which I think Smart Art got changed to Muse, but anyway. In this kit you will find a little instruction manual. There's also some QR codes. I made sure that I did not show those, and those will send you to instructional videos that Jackie herself had made. And I'm gonna have to move this box because it is gigantic. I know you can't really tell from top-down view, but it is quite large. I think it was like 10 pounds. Anyway, I'm gonna go over what was in the kit. Unfortunately, I could not do this without doing a voiceover because my house is never quiet unless the children are in bed. And I mean, I just couldn't wait to open this. So starting out, I am opening this little package here, and this is 3 different clay sculpting tools. They are metal. They are rather pretty. These were quite useful. I do make a sculpture after this. Sculpture, I say that, but I'm not really great at sculpting, so you'll see at the end. These tools have 2 different ends. Some are more round or flat, and then the others are pointed. Next, we have a little spatula to mix up your plaster and water. In this kit, she really does include everything you need. Next up, we have a collapsible bowl. This is to mix your plaster and water in. This thing is awesome, and my toddler also thinks so. He has tried to take it from me multiple times. I've let him play with it for a couple minutes. He hasn't managed to destroy it, so I'd say it's fairly sturdy. I just have to make sure he doesn't take it from me and I don't know where it is. All right, here we have a cool holographic sticker. It's my brain, your brain. And then we have a collapsible funnel. This one doesn't collapse the best. I don't know if mine just got squished or if this is just the funnel. It doesn't really matter. This works pretty well too. This is another thing that my toddler has tried to take from me. So it's toddler approved. Don't know that I would let him play with it, but yeah. We have some rubber bands. These are to hold the mold together. And now we have this little silicone cup. I'm not sure exactly what this was intended for in this kit. I haven't watched a lot of videos for it or anything, but I do have some of these for resin, so I have something similar. We also have popsicle sticks to mix things, I guess, or pour, or I'm not sure. Anyway, she really does include everything. We also have these little sanding sticks. This is 280 grit. At least I'm guessing that's what the number on that means. We have a tiny little palette to mix colors in. We have some wire. I'm not sure what gauge this is, but it's pretty easy to work with. You don't actually need like heavy duty tools except for to cut it. We have these 5 silicone tipped tools, and they have balls on the end of them. We have some paint brushes and a sharp pointy thing with refills. Now here's something pretty cool. This is the wing mold, and you can make more feathery wings, bat-like wings, or butterfly type wings. We have the little mold for a base, and then we also have this little turntable thing, which I think is quite useful, and I'm super happy to have it. Now we also have this very large silicone mat, and this has measurements on it in inches and centimeters, and it's even got some circles in the middle. I'm not really sure exactly what you would use this for, but it's pretty cool. It's very useful. I love my silicone mats. Here I'm just trying to let you see how big it is. I couldn't capture it on camera very well. And then that there's also different measurements along each side of the mat. Next, we have a measuring cup for the plaster, powder, and the water. And then here is the plaster. It's a pretty good sized bag. I'd say you could probably get at least 4 figures out of it. And next we have some cos clay. I was excited to try this one. I had never tried it before. We have some airbrush paint, but this also has 2 things in it that are not airbrush paint, which is the gold metallic paint and then the varnish. Those do not go in the airbrush. We have cos clay adhesive. It's like liquid glue, Sculpey liquid clay, I guess. And we have some acrylic paint. That's like a chalk finish. And here, this mold was designed by Jackie herself, and it is a horse-like figure. I know it can be used for other things, and I will use it for other things, but the body still strongly reminds me of a horse. And next, the thing I was super excited about, the portable airbrush. Unfortunately, I don't really use it for this project, but I was so excited to get it. It is so cool, you guys. It uses USB to charge, so you don't have to have like a compressed air machine or a little air cartridge, so that's awesome. So moving on to a project. I am trying to get the mold together. You kind of have to like wiggle the pieces together. This is a 3-part mold. You have to wiggle the pieces together to make sure that they lock in place, and then you place a bunch of rubber... Can't even talk. Oh, I'm too excited. You place a bunch of rubber bands along the various parts of it to keep it closed. I really wasn't sure how many rubber bands to use, so I used a lot. Now that I have finished putting on my 20 rubber bands, I'm exaggerating slightly. I don't know how many I used, but it was a lot. And I'm going to measure out my plaster mix. The important thing to note here is that you don't need to pack it down. You're just supposed to lightly shake it just a little bit to make sure that it's not packed in too much. Going back and looking at this video, I feel like this took me way longer than it should have. I think I was being a little bit too shy with pouring the mix in. Now that that's measured appropriately, you dump it into your little collapsible bowl and you get your water. Now, I didn't know whether I should get cold water, warm water. I kind of made it warm-ish. Not super warm, but also not cold. You pour that in there, you mix it up, and I really thought I got all the clumps out when I mixed it up, because like here you can see it's very clumpy. I realized I was wrong in that when I went to pour it in my mold, and you'll see that in a minute. But yeah, just mix it. You're supposed to mix it until there's no more clumps. Sometimes that's a little bit easier said than done, I guess. At least in my case. I might be the only one to have any issues with that. I don't know. Alright, here's where I thought it's probably good now. So I put my funnel in there. And then I went a little crazy. I just tried to pour it in there. You can see there's clumps. There is definite clumps going in there. So I stopped, tried to mix it up again, just to make sure I got some clumps out. Also tried to move the mold around a little bit to make sure that the plaster got to the back legs. Yeah, there was still a few clumps. And then I over pour too, because why not? Once I realized that was not going down into the mold, I did try to kind of get it back in my bowl. Also, I had to shake my mold a little bit to try to make sure that the plaster settled in all the areas and hopefully it prevented more bubbles in it. The rest of my plaster, I decided I was just going to put in the little circle base mold. I thought about doing wings, but I kind of opted out of that last minute when I realized I didn't have as much plaster as I had wanted. Now here, it had already been an hour, and the instructions say to take off the side pieces. Now, I live in an extremely humid area, but I was like, you know what? It's fine. I should just take it off, let it dry out for an hour, and I should be good. I had problems. So here you see I'm taking off the rubber bands super carefully, trying not to like jar anything or break anything. This part's not the part that gives me problems. I'm able to peel off the sides. This was important because of my area being so humid. It definitely wasn't going to get fully dry with the two side pieces on it. And then here's where I notice I have a lot of bubbles in my little figure. So now that I have demolded the sides of my figure, I am supposed to let it set for an additional hour and let it fully dry. So here we are, 1 hour later, and I am trying to gently peel away this middle portion of the mold. And in order to do this, you're supposed to kind of like pry a little bit at the sides gently around the legs and things just to make sure that the mold will come free from it. And you're supposed to be really delicate. Well, at this point, I realized that my figure was still pretty, here's somebody's favorite word, moist. It was still probably more wet than it should have been. It was holding its shape, but I did feel like this might be a problem. But I continued with it anyway because I'm stupid. I don't know what to tell you. But then there you go. It broke. The leg broke. I was trying to be gentle too. So that was sad. I was like, whatever, I'll just glue it back together. Then I realized I don't have super glue, so this project didn't get very far. But anyway, I decided I would continue to take the mold off, see what I was working with. I definitely didn't want a 3-legged animal, so I had to figure something out. So after looking at it for a minute, I decided I was just going to recast the creature. So this is the second attempt, and I did not break any legs off. Yay! I did try to neaten up the seams a little bit using my sharp pointy thing. And ultimately this was still necessary to some extent, especially on the bottom of the feet. But I covered this whole thing with clay. So if you're planning on doing that, you don't really have to make sure all of the seams are super smooth. Now this one, you can see it does have a large like knot on the head from where I filled it. And this I was like, oh gosh, this is going to be hard to come off. But it's really not. Like it popped off much easier than I thought. For a second I feared for my thumb, but I made it out unscathed. Now I'm just sanding it. Again, this really wasn't super necessary. Like maybe on the face a little bit and, you know, towards the bottom of the feet. But smoothing it out just to give it a nicer finish that I will eventually cover up. Work I didn't need to do. At this time, I really didn't have a strong idea of what I wanted to do, so I was just going through the different processes. Now here, after I had let this thing fully dry, because it was still a little damp, even after sitting out for hours and hours because I live in a super humid area, I decided I was going to bulk this whole figure out. And the reason for that is because I don't want it to look very horse-like, which, I mean, in the end, it still kind of has some horse qualities to it. I wanted it to look like a dinosaur. And dinosaurs don't really look anything like a horse, you know, especially the type that stands on 4 legs. They're very elephant, rhino kind of look, I guess, as far as they're just wider in the middle and their legs are less shapely. I don't know, that sounds really weird. They're just more like trunk-like, I guess, just straight up and down, like tree trunk. So that's what I'm doing. I am bulking the entire thing out, which made me a little nervous because I wasn't sure how this was going to bake on there. In full disclosure, at some point I break a leg off of this figure because I am too heavy-handed. It was one of the back legs. I glued it back up there just with some Loctite glue or something, which I wasn't sure was going to work. It did. It was fine. It was fine in the oven and everything. It held just fine. And it was also, like I said, completely covered in clay, so that kind of helped. Another thing that I want you to be completely aware of, I'm not trying to hide the fact, that there are cracks in my final figure a little bit, like around the belly area. I could see some cracks. They weren't anything super like noticeable or substantial, so I just let it be. And also around the legs, I don't know why for sure. Maybe it's just because I put too much clay, or maybe it was too thin. Maybe I didn't press it in enough because I was afraid to break the legs. I'm not sure. But the clay you can feel isn't quite stuck to the plaster figure underneath at the legs. You can kind of feel where the clay bends a little bit if you push on it. I don't think it's going to matter any because it's just going to sit somewhere. It's not to be played with or handled a whole lot. So we'll see how long it lasts. But yeah, if you do this, you might have similar issues, and I honestly don't know how to troubleshoot those issues. Now, after I have covered the entire thing in clay, I didn't figure anybody wanted to see that, I have baked it. And this was just like a 20-minute bake or whatever on the appropriate temperature in my oven. And so this is hard, it's dried. I did this so that I wouldn't ruin any of the detail I already had. Well, not really detail. I didn't want to smush the legs or the head or anything while I was working on other parts of the body. Now here I have the wire. I have twisted it to double it to the length of the tail. And now I am putting the cosplay adhesive and the cosplay inside the hole for the tail. Now here, I really didn't know what I was doing. I thought maybe I would attach the tail first and then try to bulk it out with tinfoil so I didn't have to use so much cosplay. But that was really awkward to try to do it like that, so I ended up just removing the tail from the body, and then I tried to shape it from there. And I did try to make sure that I pushed the foil as tightly against the wire as I could so that in the baking process it didn't expand and crack my clay, which I really had no issues with the tail at all, so I guess I did okay. Now once I am happy with the shape of the tail, roughly, I mean it doesn't look great or anything, but it's bulked out enough. I add it back to the body, cover that with some clay, and then use the clay adhesive around the foil to attach the clay to it. I'm assuming this was a necessary process, with the clay adhesive. I didn't want to risk it. And here I decided it's still too awkward to add pieces to the tail when it's already attached to the body, so I remove it again. I know it's probably frustrating for someone to watch. I really did not know what I was doing for most of this. I used to kind of dabble in polymer clay things. I would make little polymer clay food charms. It's like my favorite thing to do for a little while. So it's not like this is my first experience with polymer clay, but I've never really done a full-on sculpture, which I can't really say I've done a whole lot sculpting in this. Like it's minimal sculpting. This process is pretty much like with the body. The only difference is it's being put on tinfoil instead of plaster. So after I have put the tail back for like the 10th time, I don't know, I add more liquid adhesive and the clay adhesive. Don't use any other adhesive. And then I just add the clay and try to smooth it out as best as I can to get it to look like it's attached to the body in a natural way. This one was much easier than I thought it would be. And these little metal tools, they are great. Love them. Love them so much. They're so good for this kind of thing. I found it worked better than the little silicone tip tools, and maybe that's just because my clay wasn't super soft, but I enjoyed using it. It was a good user experience. I do bring in the little silicone tipped tools for like the softer clay bits, just so it doesn't leave as many lines and marks in it. Also, I found if I used some of the liquid clay adhesive on my fingers or on one of the tools, it did smooth it out pretty well too. Next, I'm going to add more of a cheek shape to my dinosaur. I wanted it to have more of a pronounced jaw, so I'm just attaching this. This is being attached to hardened clay, so I did feel like I needed to use the liquid clay for this too. And I don't know if you have to when it's just like wet clay on wet clay, but depending on what I was doing, I did add some of the wet clay to that too. But this is just me smoothing it down as best as I could. I was trying to keep it mostly even. That's not always super easy for me to do, but in the end, I think it looked pretty good. I kept looking at it from the top. Also, quick note, this angle is not the best for a lot of this, and I'm sorry that you can't see every little detail of what I'm doing. My setup is not meant for clay crafting. It's really for card making, and I don't even know that this is necessarily the best one, but my little stand that I have to hold my phone is also not the best anymore. It starts to move in weird ways when I don't want it to sometimes, so if you ever see my camera just like drift off in a different direction, it's because my phone is moving, because the arm's not holding it like it should. All right, back to my little sculpture. The beak area, I kind of added more clay to that, and I was trying to get it in more of a beak shape. And it's at this point that this really reminded me of like a hippogriff or something. Not what I was making at all. but I thought about it for a second. It's less my style though. I like the dinosaur idea better. I'm just fussing with the cheeks, trying to get them even. I felt like that one was a little bit too small, so I added some more clay, just smoothing it out. Now here I decided that leg just wasn't quite wide enough, so I'm going to add more clay to it just to make it more elephant-like. That's the only thing I could think of. It's just like an elephant leg. It was what I kind of got from some of the bigger, herbivore dinosaurs. Now this got baked again, and I decided I needed some more clay around the tail just to make it look more connected to the body. And I didn't do this before now because I knew I would squish the tail too much, and I didn't want it to move out of place or anything. So this thing has seen the oven a few times already. I decided it needed some more pronounced hips, so I am doing the same thing I did with the cheeks, just adding the liquid clay adhesive and then kind of like a ball of clay on each side, and I flatten it out and make it the shape I want it to. So something I did do is I found one of my children's dinosaur toys, which you could see briefly at the top left-hand side of my screen, and I realized that the dinosaur kind of had like a ridge along their back, so I wanted to mimic that. So I just did a little rope of clay, and I kind of smushed it down on the back of the spine and made it kind of sort of triangular in shape where it was pointed at the top. And I did this a little bit up the neck as well. Now the part I was most afraid of was the crest on the head. So if you haven't guessed it yet, I am making a Triceratops-like creature. And I just had this like rough shape that was fatter at the bottom and thinner at the top. And I have attached it to the head the same as I did with the cheeks and the hips and everything. And I'm just trying to bulk it out and get it the right shape. And then I decided I also need some more detail to the face. This is where my children's toys came in handy. I looked at one of the dinosaurs they had, and it had this distinct separation between the nose area and the like beaky mouth part of the dinosaur. I was pretty tickled with myself at this point. Like I said, I'm not really much of a sculptor, but I had something that was starting to look like a dinosaur creature, so that was great. I am building up where the eyes are going to be, and this, I don't know, I wasn't super happy with, but I left it, and I think I messed with it again later, so it might look slightly different when you see it next time. For the crest, I had originally thought maybe I would add some spikes, but it looked too vicious that way, and I didn't want it to. So I changed plans. I added a little bit more to the beak, made it a little more pointy, and I think, no, it wasn't baked at this point. I'm adding some detail into the beak, kind of like the little lines that are on bird beaks and things. Added the little nostrils in there, and I added the line just to make the beak and the nose part separate a little bit more. Now here I'm going to do little whipped cream swirls. So I just took 3 balls of clay and rolled them out into sort of carrot shapes and twisted them together. I tried to blend in where they met a little bit so it didn't look so separate, it looked more like one thing. I did find that if you used one slightly bigger ball of clay and 2 smaller ones, it looked a little bit better. Here I'm texturing the crest of the head, and I'm using a crunched up ball of tinfoil, and I also had made a little texture thing from one of my kids' dinosaurs. I used some like mold putty or whatever. It wasn't actually that useful in this. But here, after I had textured it, I'm adding little balls of clay here and there at the crest. And this is because I'm going to make this look like a cookie. And I wanted it to look like a chocolate chip cookie because those are my favorite cookies. Then I decided I wanted to make a little hole, well, not hole, a chunk cut out of it, like it was a bite taken out of the crest. I thought it would be cute. I don't really know why it would be cute for something's head to be bitten, but that's what I did. So anyway, I am attaching the little whipped cream horns with some clay that I had mixed with the clay adhesive just to make it really soft. And this just kind of helped me stick it down. I did have to mess with this a little bit to get them up there pretty well. I'm gonna do the same thing with the little nose horn. This bit was quite fiddly, but I didn't want to lose the detail that I had in the horns, and I didn't want to mess up the face too much. That was another reason why I mixed up the clay with the liquid adhesive, just to get something where I could kind of spackle it together, I guess. I also made 2 little horns for the tail, and these are also whipped cream horns. I left it pretty minimal with the horns because I didn't want it to look too scary, I guess, or too mean. Now, as the instructions say, you are supposed to use the acrylic paint at least 3 coats over your whole thing before you airbrush. So here I'm going to try out the airbrush. So I'm mixing some colors. I was going for a cookie color. It was too yellow. I didn't like it. So that was my fault, not the airbrush fault. So I just decided I would bust out my acrylic paints. So I have painted, I was about to say color. I'm so used to coloring things. I have painted the crest, kind of a tan cookie color. This was straight out of the jar. This is acrylic paint, by the way. And then I have mixed up a pale tan color for the body. And at this point, I thought maybe I would make the body look like cookie dough ice cream, because why not? That's delicious. Here I am using the brown straight out of the bottle for the beak. The chocolate chips, I decided I would paint the toenails brown. Now I'm mixing the brown with the black to create the pattern that I wanted on the dinosaur. I also wanted it to not just look like a pattern, but look like sort of like a hot fudge chocolate drip along the back or whatever. I don't know how well that turned out exactly, because I was really trying to keep it symmetrical on both sides, because I imagined kind of like a stripe-ish sort of pattern on a dinosaur. After that, I'm adding some of the little cookie color spots here and there along the pale part of the dinosaur to mimic balls of cookie dough in some ice cream. And then I'm going to go back in with the regular brown, and I'm just making little chocolate chips here and there in the pale part, again, to mimic cookie dough ice cream. Now this is super sped up, so I know it doesn't look like it took me a while, but this really took me probably at least a week to get this done, and that was with me forcing myself. So here is my completed chocolate chip cookie dough dinosaur. I don't know what to name it. Maybe you guys could help me. Also, I forgot to mention that this is a limited time available kit. If you would like it, I'm going to leave the link down below. Get it while you can. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll be back with another video soon. Bye!